I hadn't seen Aaron Reynolds in 13 years, not since the summer after 5th grade, when his mom packed up their entire life into a U-Haul and drove them across the country. I remember watching that truck from my bedroom window, chin on the sill, barely blinking until it turned the corner and disappeared for good. At least, that's what I thought. We'd been best friends since the age of 6. Our moms met at some PTA thing, and from then on, Aaron was at my house more often than not. We built Lego cities that took up my whole bedroom, made up dumb songs we thought were genius, and swore we'd be each other's best man someday, though neither of us really knew what that meant at the time. And then he was gone. We wrote letters for a while, then emails, then nothing. Middle school got messy, high school got busier, and by college, he felt more like a memory than a person. I still thought about him sometimes, like when a certain song came on, or when I drove past his old house, but life moved on, until last week. I was in line at the coffee shop across from the hardware store where I worked. It was a slow morning, early December, not many people around. I had my earbuds in, scrolling aimlessly through my phone when I heard someone behind me say, "Excuse me, but do they still make those ridiculous caramel things you used to get? You know, the ones that gave you a stomachache every time?" I turned around, and there he was. At first, I didn't believe it. I blinked like an idiot, certain my brain was filling in a stranger's face with nostalgia. But then he smiled. That crooked smile I used to copy in front of the mirror because I thought it made him look cooler than me. "Aaron?" he laughed. "Took you long enough." I don't remember what I said next. Something like, "Holy shit," or "You're here." Probably both. We stood in that cafe like the rest of the world had been paused, just staring at each other, trying to bridge the gap between childhood and now. He looked good. Taller than me now, which wasn't always the case. He had facial hair, a subtle, tidy beard, and the kind of jawline that made me immediately self-conscious about my own. His hair was shorter on the sides, longer on top, and his eyes, still that ridiculous golden hazel, looked exactly the same. "What are you doing here?" I finally asked. He grinned, stepping forward for a hug. "Moved back last month. My mom's health isn't great, and remote work makes it easy to be anywhere. Thought I'd crash with her for a while." It wasn't until after we got our coffee and sat down at a corner table that it fully hit me. Aaron Reynolds, my childhood best friend, the one I used to write dumb comics with, the one I maybe kinda had a huge unspoken crush on before I even knew what a crush was sitting across from me, sipping coffee like no time had passed. We talked for 2 hours. About nothing and everything. His job in UX design. My job managing the hardware store. What happened to old classmates? How weird it felt to be adults in a town that still had the same Dairy Queen we used to ride our bikes to. When I finally checked my watch and realized I was late for work, he leaned back in his chair and said, "We should hang out sometime, like properly. Maybe this weekend?" "Yeah," I said, trying not to sound too eager. "That'd be cool." He pulled out his phone. "Still have the same number?" "Same one since high school." We exchanged numbers, and as I stood up to leave, he said, "Hey, you still live in that gray house with the crooked mailbox?" I paused. "Yeah." He smiled. "Good. Just checking." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, phone on my chest, heart pounding like I was 16 again. Something in the way he looked at me, just a little too long, a little too soft, had stirred something I hadn't felt in years. A possibility I thought I'd outgrown. I didn't know what would happen. Maybe nothing. Maybe it was just two old friends reconnecting. But that weekend, when I stepped into his mom's living room for the first time since I was a kid, and he gave me that smile again, warmer now, closer, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to be just a reunion. It was the beginning of something. The first time I stepped back into Aaron's house after all those years, it was like walking into a preserved memory. Only now, everything was slightly smaller than I remembered. The kitchen still had those weird green countertops, the same fridge with faded magnets, the floor that creaked in the same spot near the hallway. But Aaron? He didn't belong to that memory anymore. He looked like someone who'd outgrown this place in every way, and yet somehow fit into it even better now. "Still smells like cinnamon and dust in here," I said, stepping out of my shoes. He chuckled from the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of something amber. You'd think she'd swapped out the air freshener in the last decade. But nope, same one, same spot. She's a creature of habit. I took the glass he offered me. Whiskey, not the cheap kind either. She out tonight? I asked, glancing toward the hallway. Yeah, he said, casually. Bingo night at the church. She goes more for the gossip than the game. Won't be back till late. There was a moment, just a flicker, where the air felt heavier. Not in a bad way. Just thick with something unspoken. We ended up in the living room, on the old sectional couch that used to be our spaceship, our wrestling ring, our base during Pillow Wars. The TV was off. Music played softly through a Bluetooth speaker, the war on drugs, something dreamy and low. We talked more. This time, deeper stuff. Not just updates, but real things. He told me about his breakup 2 years ago. Nothing dramatic, just a slow unraveling. I told him about the year I tried living in the city and hated every second of it. We talked about our dads. His, still mostly absent. Mine, retired and obsessed with woodworking now. And when he asked about my dating life, I hesitated. You seeing anyone? He said, swirling the ice in his glass. I shook my head. Nah. I've gone on a few dates, but nothing stuck. He nodded like he understood. Same. I think I got too comfortable being alone for a while. Feels easier sometimes, doesn't it? Yeah, I said, then added, easier until you realize you're just existing. His eyes met mine, and I swear there was something there. Something cautious, but present. Curious. We let the silence stretch for a minute, not uncomfortable, just full. His leg brushed mine lightly when he shifted, and neither of us moved away. You know, he said eventually, leaning back, it's weird seeing you like this. Like what? Grown up. He laughed softly, eyes still on me. I mean, obviously you are. But part of me still remembers the kid who cried when he broke his Game Boy. I dropped it in your toilet, I said, grinning. It wasn't my fault. You tried to play it while peeing. That was very much your fault. We both laughed, and it felt stupidly good. The night went on. The whiskey made everything warmer, easier. Our legs stayed touching. He didn't pull away when I stretched a bit closer to grab my glass. I didn't pull away when his arm rested along the back of the couch, his fingers just brushing my shoulder. At one point, I turned toward him, and he was already looking at me. Not intensely, not in a way that demanded anything. Just looking, like he was seeing me for the first time again. What? I asked, barely above a whisper. He shrugged slowly and said, Nothing. Just weird being here with you again. In this house. Like we stepped out of a dream. That hit something in my chest. Yeah, I said. I know what you mean. We didn't say anything else for a long while. I think we both knew that moment was balancing on something fragile. Something that could tip either way. Eventually, I stood up and stretched, pretending like I wasn't hyper-aware of every nerve in my body. I should probably head out, I said, though I didn't want to. You don't have to, he said quickly, then hesitated. I mean, you can crash here if you want. It's late and cold. I glanced at the window. It had started snowing. Just a light dusting, but enough to cover the street in white. You sure? Yeah, of course. He got up and led me down the hall to his old room. It hadn't changed much, new sheets, maybe a better lamp, but the layout was the same. It was strange seeing it as an adult. I can take the couch, I offered. He gave me a look. Don't be stupid. There's plenty of room. There wasn't, really. The bed was a full size at best. But I didn't argue. We both got ready for bed without saying much. I borrowed a pair of old sweats he found in a drawer. We turned off the lights. And then we were lying there, shoulder to shoulder, close enough to feel the warmth radiating between us. Not touching. Not yet. I miss this, he said quietly in the dark. Me too. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I used to think about what it would have been like if I hadn't moved. My heart picked up. Yeah, like who we would have become. I turned my head slightly on the pillow. Maybe the same people. Just sooner. Aaron didn't respond right away, but then he reached out, slow and uncertain, and his fingers found mine under the covers. He didn't say anything else, and he didn't let go. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was uncomfortable. Aaron's bed was surprisingly decent, and the room was warm despite the drafty old windows. It was the way his fingers curled around mine under the blanket, the way neither of us said a word after that. But neither of us let go either. We just laid there, still and quiet, like the tiniest movement might break whatever strange, delicate thing had settled between us. At some point, I must have drifted off because I woke to soft light creeping in around the edges of the blinds and the faint hum of his space heater. I blinked, trying to orient myself, and felt the absence immediately. His hand wasn't in mine anymore. The bed beside me was empty. For a second, I panicked. Like maybe I'd imagined it, or maybe he'd left on purpose, realizing in the harsh light of morning that he'd made a mistake. But then I heard movement from the kitchen, the sound of cabinets opening, a kettle switching on. I sat up, rubbed my face, and told myself to chill the hell out. I found him barefoot, leaning against the counter in a hoodie and plaid pajama pants, staring at his phone like it owed him an answer. He looked up when he heard me and smiled, easy, like nothing was weird. "Morning," he said. "Hey." He poured 2 mugs of coffee, black for him, cream and sugar for me, just like it used to be. We sat at the table, sipping in silence, the kind of silence that was too full to be casual. Finally, he spoke. "So, last night," my stomach flipped. I kept my eyes on my mug. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded slow. Yeah. Yeah. Are you?" Aaron took a long sip, then set his cup down. "Yeah. I just didn't want to pretend like it didn't happen." "It didn't really happen, though," I said carefully. We didn't do anything." He raised an eyebrow. "You don't think holding hands counts?" I opened my mouth, then shut it. He had a point. "It's not nothing," he added, quieter this time. We didn't say anything for a bit. I looked out the window. The snow had stopped sometime overnight. Everything was dusted white, the street outside still empty. "I wasn't expecting it," I said eventually. "Me neither," he admitted, "but it didn't feel wrong." "No," I said, too fast. "It didn't." That seemed to ease something in both of us. The air shifted again, less tense, more open. He nudged his mug with his finger, like he was thinking hard. "You know, when we were kids, I think I felt something. Even then. But I didn't have the words for it." I looked at him. "Same." He smiled, kind of sad. "Figures." I shook my head, still wrapping my brain around all of this. "So what now?" Aaron leaned back in his chair, stretching. "I don't know. I'm not in a rush to define anything. But I do know I don't want to pretend anymore." I nodded slowly, my chest feeling too tight for such a simple conversation. "Okay." He stood up and grabbed our empty mugs. As he rinsed them out, he said, "I'm supposed to meet up with my mom later, take her to an appointment, but you should come by again tonight. We could hang out, watch something." I could feel myself smiling like a teenager. "Yeah, I'd like that." The rest of the day passed in a strange haze. Work felt irrelevant. Every time I stocked a shelf or rang up a customer, my mind wandered back to that moment in his bed, to the way his thumb had moved just a little over mine, to how easy it had been to fall back into him. I didn't tell anyone. Not that there was anyone to tell. I wasn't exactly out to a big group, a couple of close friends, sure. But this was too new, too sacred. When I showed up that evening, it felt different walking up to his front door, like I was arriving for a date. My heart was beating too fast. I had that stupid internal monologue going full speed. What if it was weird now? What if last night was just a fluke? But when he opened the door, his face lit up. And just like that, the nerves settled. We ordered takeout, sat on the floor in his room, eating noodles straight from the cartons. the way we used to during sleepovers. We watched The Thing, his pick, obviously, and debated the ending like we had any new insight to add. At some point during the movie, he shifted closer, close enough that our knees touched, and when the credits rolled, he didn't move away. Neither did I. He turned to me, his voice low. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah, of course. Did you ever think about this?" His eyes didn't leave mine. "Like, back then, us," I swallowed. "Every day." His expression softened. "Me too." There wasn't some big dramatic moment. No cinematic music swell, just a quiet space between us, and a slow, intentional movement as he leaned in. I met him halfway. It was a kiss like you'd expect between two people who've thought about it for way too long. Cautious at first, testing, then steady, familiar, like we'd done it before in some dream we both remembered. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "Took us long enough." I couldn't argue with that. I didn't want to leave that night. We sat on his bed for what felt like hours after the kiss. No more TV, no more background noise, just our quiet, overlapping breaths and a subtle awareness that something had shifted between us in a way we couldn't undo. It wasn't even about the kiss, really. It was everything behind it. The way he looked at me. The way we didn't need to talk for a while after. There was no awkward scramble to explain or justify. It was just understood. Eventually, around midnight, I stood up and said I should go. "You sure?" he asked, not pressuring, just asking. I nodded. I should probably sleep in my own bed at least once this week. He walked me to the door barefoot, hoodie sleeves pushed up to his elbows. He looked like he didn't want me to leave either. Right before I stepped outside, he grabbed my wrist gently. "Hey." I turned and he leaned in again, slower this time, softer. His lips met mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. When we broke apart, he smiled a little. "I've been thinking about that since I was 12. I laughed, my breath fogging in the cold air. "I think I've been waiting for it since then." He rubbed the back of his neck, sheepish. "We were such dumb kids. And somehow still dumb adults," I said. "But maybe slightly better looking." Aaron grinned. "Speak for yourself." The next few days were kind of a blur. We didn't talk constantly, but we texted every morning. Little things, memes, inside jokes, pictures of his dog lying upside down on the couch. It felt easy, natural, like we'd just picked up a conversation that had been paused for over a decade. The weirdest part, I wasn't freaking out. I mean, yes, I replayed that kiss in my head roughly 1,000 times. Yes, my stomach dropped every time his name popped up on my phone, but I wasn't overanalyzing every word, every emoji. I wasn't bracing for it to crash. Because somehow, with Aaron, it didn't feel fragile. On Thursday, I was closing up the shop when he texted, "You busy tonight? Come over. I want to show you something." I stared at the screen for a second, heart skipping, then typed back, "I'm already grabbing my coat." When I got to his place, he met me at the door with a smirk and 2 mugs of something steaming. "Hot cider," he said, handing me one. "And before you say anything, yes, it's alcoholic." Even better. He led me out back, where the old fire pit had been revived. It was already crackling, throwing shadows across the snow-covered lawn. "He fixed it up?" I asked. "Figured we needed somewhere to talk that isn't my childhood bedroom," he said with a grin. We sat on opposite ends of a low bench made from 2 milk crates and a wide slab of wood. The fire popped and hissed as we sipped our drinks. "I used to imagine this exact thing," he said after a while. I looked at him. "What thing?" "This. Us. Sitting here. Back home again. Just together." I didn't say anything right away. The heat of the fire made my face flush, but it wasn't just that. "I used to imagine it too," I said. Then I stopped, because it felt impossible. Aaron nodded slowly. "I get that." He shifted a little closer. "It's still kind of surreal, right? Like, if you had told me back in high school that I'd end up back in this town, sitting next to you, holding your hand, I would have laughed. Or panicked," I added. He smiled. "Or that." There was a pause, and then he looked at me seriously. Are you okay with this? With whatever we're doing? I didn't even need to think. Yeah, I am. He reached out and took my hand again. No hesitation this time. I'm not in a rush, he said, but I'm not scared of it either, not like I used to be. That hit me harder than I expected, because I remembered that version of him, the confident kid who always seemed sure of himself, even when I wasn't. And hearing him admit that he was scared back then made me realize how much we'd both been holding back. We stayed by the fire until the logs burned down and the cold started seeping into our jeans. Back inside, we sat on the couch and talked more. About the past. About the weird in-between phase we were in now. We didn't label anything, we didn't need to. It was enough just to say it out loud. At some point, I must have leaned against him. Or maybe he pulled me in. Either way, we ended up sitting with my head resting on his shoulder, his hand tracing slow circles on my back. Can I tell you something? I asked, voice muffled. Of course. I think I'm falling for you. He went still for a second. Then I felt him exhale, slow and steady. I think I already did. Falling asleep next to someone is always more intimate than kissing them. That's what I realized the night Aaron and I curled up on his couch, under a too small fleece blanket, the TV still glowing silently in the background. We didn't talk much after I told him I thought I was falling for him. We didn't need to. He kissed my temple once. Then I felt him breathe against the top of my head, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that slowly lulled me to sleep. I woke up around 3 a.m., stiff and cold, but still tucked against him. His arm was around me, his hand resting on my waist, our legs tangled under the blanket like we'd done this 100 times. And even though my back ached and my neck felt wrecked from the weird angle, I didn't want to move. Not yet. The next morning, we both had to be up early. He had a video meeting with some out-of-state client, and I had a delivery coming into the store. I stood in his hallway, hoodie half-zipped, watching him fiddle with his webcam. You always this professional looking? I asked. He gave me a dry look. I work in UX, not a startup cult. I don't need to wear a tie. I laughed and leaned in the doorway. I'll let you get to it. He turned before I could step away. Hey, tonight? Yeah, I said without hesitation. I'll come by. And I did. That night, and the night after. Some nights we just ate dinner and watched Netflix until one of us passed out. Other nights we talked for hours about everything. His guilt about being gone for so long, my fear of staying in this town forever, how neither of us had ever really dated someone seriously, and how that scared us in different ways. By the end of the second week, I had a toothbrush at his place. One of my hoodies mysteriously ended up in his laundry basket. He stole it, of course. He denied it, but he definitely stole it. The weird part, it didn't feel fast. It felt overdue. But with all that comfort came a creeping unease I didn't want to admit out loud. Not to him, not even to myself. Something that scratched at the back of my thoughts when I was alone. What are we? It's not that I needed a label. I wasn't in high school anymore, waiting for someone to say the magic words. But a small part of me couldn't help wondering what this meant. To him. To us. So one night, we were sprawled on his bed, half under the covers, half out, both of us scrolling aimlessly on our phones, when I finally said it. Hey, can I ask you something kind of dumb? He looked up immediately. When have you ever asked me something dumb? That's generous. He smiled. Shoot. I hesitated. Do you talk about this with anyone? He blinked. What do you mean? Like, us? Do your friends know? Or your mom? He set his phone down. I'm not asking because I want to shout it from the rooftops, I said quickly. It's just, I don't know. I've never done this either. And sometimes I feel like I'm holding it in. He sat up slightly, leaning on his elbow. It's not dumb. I waited, chewing on the inside of my cheek. I've told a couple people, he said, My college roommate knows. One of my coworkers. I think my mom might suspect something, but I haven't said it out loud. That's more than I expected. He reached for my hand. It's not that I don't want people to know. It's just new, and I want to protect it. I nodded slowly. That made sense. It really did. But part of me still felt like I needed something clearer. Do you want to keep it casual? I asked, quiet. Because if you do, that's okay. I just need to know. He squeezed my hand. No, I don't want casual. I looked at him. I want real, he said. That stopped me. Me too, I said after a beat. The tension broke then. He leaned in and kissed me. Slow, steady, like he meant it. And I kissed him back with everything I'd been holding in. We didn't go further than that night. There was no rush. Just a long, quiet evening of holding each other under the blankets, our feet tangled, his breath warm against my neck. That night, I didn't go home. And for the first time, it didn't feel like crashing at a friend's place. It felt like staying where I belonged. The first time we went out together. Like, really out. It wasn't planned. It was a Saturday, unseasonably warm for January, and Aaron suggested we grab brunch. Nothing dramatic. Just eggs, coffee, and a chance to eat somewhere other than his kitchen. We went to this small cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place where people still read newspapers and everyone knows the barista's name. We found a booth in the back and ordered something obnoxiously loaded with avocado. It should have been nothing, but somewhere between laughing over his terrible latte art attempt and splitting a side of pancakes, I looked up and noticed a familiar face by the door. Mrs. Callahan, my old neighbor. She spotted me, smiled, then tilted her head slightly as her eyes flicked to Aaron sitting across from me. I saw the brief pause in her expression, not judgmental exactly, just calculating. And just like that, the spell broke. Aaron noticed. Of course he did. Everything okay? He asked, lowering his coffee. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Just surprised to see someone I know. We finished our food and walked out into the sun. I could feel the tension clinging to me like static. You sure you're good? He asked again. I nodded. Yeah, sorry, it's not a big deal. I haven't really been seen with a guy like that before. Not in this town. He nodded, quiet for a moment. Do you want to go somewhere else next time? Somewhere further? No, I said quickly. I don't want to hide. I'm just not used to being seen. Aaron reached out, linking our fingers loosely as we walked toward the car. Then let's get used to it together. It wasn't that I was ashamed. I'd come out years ago, quietly, on my own terms. A few close friends, my sister, and eventually my parents. But the town? The town was different. People here didn't talk about things directly. They just noticed. A pause too long, a question asked sideways. An invitation that suddenly stopped coming. So when word got around that Aaron Reynolds had moved back into town and had been spending a lot of time with Eli Hayes, I knew it was only a matter of time before the questions started. And they did. I ran into Josh, an old classmate, at the hardware store. You and Aaron hanging out a lot, huh? He said, a smirk playing at his lips. Yeah, I said flatly. Just like old times, I guess. I nodded, staring back at him. Exactly. He didn't push, but I could see it in his eyes. That quiet curiosity that was less about caring and more about collecting details. When I told Aaron later, he shrugged. Let them think what they want. They've got nothing better to do. I know, I said. It just gets in my head sometimes. Aaron was better at letting things roll off. Maybe it was all those years living somewhere else, somewhere bigger. Maybe it was just who he was. But I still caught him glancing over his shoulder in town sometimes. Still noticed how he avoided grabbing my hand when we were walking around the neighborhood. We were both learning how to be visible. One night we were lying on his bed, shoulders touching, music low. You ever wish we hadn't waited this long? I asked. Aaron turned his head toward me. Yeah, sometimes. I nodded. Me too. But then, he added, I think maybe we wouldn't have been ready. I mean, I thought I was ready at 18, but I was terrified. Same. He was quiet for a beat. And now? Still scared, I said honestly. But less. He reached over, his fingers brushing mine. You don't have to be brave all the time, not with me. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him. He was lying on his side now, one arm tucked under his head, the other resting between us. His face was calm, but there was something vulnerable in his eyes, like he was still waiting for permission to be fully known. So I gave it. I shifted closer and kissed him. Slower this time. Deeper. And he kissed me back like he didn't want it to end, like he finally let himself need something. That night, we didn't stop at just kissing. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't some big, dramatic moment. It was quiet, careful. A series of touches and breaths and whispered okays, like two people finally letting themselves be seen fully and realizing they weren't going anywhere. Afterward, we just lay there, limbs tangled, the sheets messy around us. You okay? He whispered. I nodded against his chest. Yeah. Are you? Never been more. And in that quiet, warm moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this thing between us could be something real. Not just something we missed out on as kids, but something we were building now. Together. A week after that night, everything changed. Again. It didn't come from some dramatic moment or a fight or anything like that. It came from the most mundane thing imaginable. The grocery store. We were just trying to buy cereal and almond milk. Aaron had reached for a box on the top shelf. Some overpriced organic thing he swore tasted better than the sugary stuff I liked, and I'd made a joke about him being tall and smug. He rolled his eyes and stepped closer, mock bumping me with his shoulder as he passed me the box. And I laughed and reached out to straighten the collar of his hoodie, without thinking. That's all it was. But when I turned around, there was a woman standing in the aisle, middle-aged, short haircut, pushing a cart half filled with frozen dinners and dog food. She was just standing there, watching us. Not smiling, not moving, just watching. Aaron didn't notice at first. He was still trying to decide between two kinds of granola bars. But I froze. I knew that face. That expression. I'd seen it before. When I came out to my aunt, when I brought a boyfriend to a friend's wedding, when two guys held hands in a restaurant, and half the room went quiet. The woman didn't say anything. She just turned and wheeled her cart away. But the damage was done. Aaron glanced at me and must have seen the change in my face. What's wrong? I forced a smile. Nothing, it's fine. He studied me for a second, then dropped the box into the cart and stepped closer. Who was that? No one, I said too quickly. Just someone from church, maybe. He didn't press, but I knew he saw it. That night, he brought it up. We were back at his place, eating leftovers on the couch. The TV playing something neither of us were watching. Do you want to stop? He asked quietly. I looked over at him. Stop what? This, he said, gesturing between us. If it's making your life harder. It took me a second to respond. Aaron, no. You looked like you saw a ghost in that aisle. I was just caught off guard, I said. That's all. He nodded, but his eyes didn't leave mine. I've had people look at me like that before, I admitted. It just brings stuff up. Makes me feel like I'm 17 again, trying to hide everything. I don't want you to have to hide, he said, his voice quiet. I don't want to either, I said. I'm just not used to being this open in front of everyone. Aaron reached out and took my hand. You don't have to explain it to me. I get it. I'm still figuring it out too. I squeezed his hand. I'm not going anywhere. He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. That weekend, we went to a small get-together at his coworker Devin's place. Mostly artists, freelancers, people who didn't bat an eye when we showed up together and sat close on the same couch. It was the first time I didn't feel watched, the first time I didn't feel like I had to overthink every touch, every glance. On the drive home, Aaron was quiet, one hand on the wheel, the other resting palm up on the center console. I slid my hand into his. I liked that, I said. Being around people who don't make it a thing, he nodded. Yeah, me too. I want more of that, he looked over briefly. We can have it, you know that, right? I wasn't so sure, but I wanted to believe him. When we got back to his place, we didn't go inside right away. We sat in the driveway, the engine ticking as it cooled, the air between us warm despite the night chill. I keep thinking about how different it could have gone, I said. What do you mean? If he hadn't come back, if I'd stayed scared, if we'd just missed each other completely. Aaron looked at me for a long second. But we didn't. No, I said, smiling. We didn't. He leaned across the console and kissed me, gentle, certain. The kind of kiss that felt less like a spark and more like a promise. And right then, I decided to stop bracing for it to fall apart. Because maybe, just maybe, we weren't building something fragile after all. Maybe we were just beginning. The first time I told my parents about Aaron, it was raining. Not the dramatic movie-style thunderstorm kind of rain, just steady, quiet, gray. The kind that makes you want to stay in bed and listen to it patter against the windows. But instead, I was sitting across from my mom and dad at their kitchen table, heart in my throat, coffee untouched. I'm seeing someone, I said. My mom glanced up from her crossword. Yeah? My dad looked over his glasses, suspicious but not unfriendly. Someone we know? I hesitated. Yeah, you do actually. It's Aaron. Silence. My mom blinked. Aaron Reynolds? Yeah. A beat, then another. My dad leaned back in his chair, processing. You two were always close, he said eventually. You used to disappear for hours into the woods behind the Miller house. My mom gave him a look. That's not the point. I braced myself. Are you happy? She asked. I nodded, unsure if my voice would come out steady. Yeah, really happy. She looked at me for a long second, then smiled, softly, gently. Then we're happy too. Just like that. No drama, no rejection, no weird silences or cryptic lines about disappointment. Just a moment of quiet acceptance that I hadn't dared to expect. And when I walked out of that house and into the rain again, I felt lighter than I had in years. That night, I told Aaron everything. He was sitting cross-legged on his bed, wearing one of my hoodies and eating a bag of tortilla chips like it was dinner. They took it better than I thought. I said, no tears, no Bible verses, just support. He grinned, reaching for another chip. Told you, people surprise you. You're surprisingly smug when you're right, he shrugged. I try to keep it humble. We spent that night like we spent most nights now, shoulder to shoulder, legs tangled, drifting in and out of sleep between low conversations and soft touches. Things didn't magically become perfect. There were still stares sometimes, still whispers, still moments when I'd catch myself hesitating, wondering if I should let go of his hand in public or step away when someone we knew walked by. But each time, Aaron would squeeze my hand just a little tighter, and that was enough to remind me not to shrink. Not anymore. Spring came quietly. The town thawed out. And so did we. We started going out more. Restaurants, game nights, even the occasional awkward bar meetup where some old classmate would look at us for a beat too long, then just nod and move on. We didn't need to make a big announcement. We just were. One afternoon, we walked past the house where Aaron used to live as a kid. It had a new coat of paint, different porch furniture, but the bones were still the same. He stopped on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the front yard. I used to sit on that swing, he said quietly, nodding toward the tree, and think about running away. I looked at him. Not in a dark way, he added. Just, I didn't know how to fit here. I always felt like I was playing a version of myself that people liked better than the real one. I reached out, sliding my fingers through his. You don't have to do that anymore, he nodded. I know, because you're here. It was the simplest thing, but it stuck with me, because he wasn't just talking about me physically standing next to him on a sidewalk. He was talking about all of it. Being seen, being real, being safe. And I was. I really was. By summer, we'd started calling it what it was. He was my boyfriend, I was his. We made jokes about who was more of a cliché. Spoiler, it was him. He bought us matching mugs that said his and also his. We hosted our first cookout together and somehow didn't burn anything. We fought over paint swatches for his apartment and ended up compromising with a shade of soft gray I secretly hated, but he loved. We were building a life, not some flashy, dramatic movie version of love, just something steady, human, ours. And late one night, when we were lying in bed with the windows open and the fan buzzing overhead, he whispered, "Hey, yeah? Do you ever think about how this all started?" I smiled into the darkness. "Every day." He turned onto his side, slid his arm across my waist. "We were just kids," I nodded. "And now, we're just not. Still feels a little unbelievable sometimes," he said. I kissed the top of his head, my hand resting over his. "Yeah," I said, "but I'm not going anywhere."